Fantastic. Okay, I guess, ooh, I just got the recording in progress notification. Um, Great. So I guess today is just an informal quick meeting about overwintering your garden, because I know that it is now, and at least here in Colorado, the leaves are starting to nest. The few potato plants that I had have died off, so we can just talk a little bit about how to think about overwintering your garden when the time is right. And I fully recognize that many of you are probably more knowledgeable about this subject than me, but I will give you the information and the guidance that I use at this point. And if others have tips or tricks, please don't hesitate to chime in and help. So I think if I remember correctly, what I did was put some information for each of the types of plants into these slides. So the milkweed and the cutleaf coneflower, those are perennial species in the garden, so they will regrow next year if you don't pull them up. Also keep in mind that they grow by rhizomes or underground stems, so they really can spread quite a bit from year to year. So keep that in mind as you're taking care of your gardens. But as far as overwintering these plants, it's relatively easy. Seeds, you can collect and store the seeds if you would like. I do that on for both the coneflower and the milkweed. The milkweed, you can cut the pods, and the coneflower, I don't have a good picture of, well, the seed heads here. These are the coneflower flowers themselves, but these round parts become seed heads. And so you can cut those off and shake out the seeds, or there's also a lot of the casing that helps the seed stay in the seed head for a little while that comes off, but the seeds are little, like, long, black, skinny. It's looks like a pencil line if you drew just a very, very short pencil line. So you will find those. I usually try to store them in paper bags. You don't want them to get wet though. So if you need to store them in paper, let them dry out, make sure that they're dry, I guess. And then you can probably put them into plastic bags to keep the moisture out. You can directly sow them into the ground in the fall if you would like. If you store them over the winter, keep in mind that they do require vernalization, so some sort of cold treatment, in order to germinate. And so what this means is basically you either should plant them before the last frost, or you can force this, in your refrigerator or your freezer. And there are instructions online that can help you figure out how to do the vernalization so that the seeds actually will germinate next year when you plant them. Yeah, I guess that's the last point that I said here. I usually cut the stems back to the ground either in the fall or the spring, just because they're pretty, they'll stay, they'll continue to stand up, or maybe just even fall over. So I find that the garden looks nicer if I trim them back. So those are the main points, I think, for the milkweed and coneflower. They will regrow next year unless you pull out the underground rhizomes. Let's see. Okay, question in the chat. Okay, somebody has to leave early. That's fine. So snap beans. So when these plants have died and the leaves turn brown and they're all shriveled, you can pull up the plant by the roots or cut the stem to the ground, however you would like to do that. Because we offer two different cultivars of the snap bean, we offer the sensitive and the resistant cultivar. Insects will cross-pollinate those cultivars. And so if you collect seeds next year, you won't know the sensitivity of those of the snap beans that you plant. So keep that in mind. We can and will send you new seeds if you want new seeds next year. Another fun activity though, if you want, is you can harvest the seed pods, and I would recommend drying them first, but then you can weigh them and get the dry weight, and you can even compare the sensitive and resistant cultivars if you want to see. Usually at least what most people find is that the resistant cultivar has larger seed pods than the sensitive cultivars, especially if you're seeing ozone damage. So keep that in mind. That's a fun, fun near the end of the season activity if you would like to do that. So again, you're welcome to collect the seed pods if you like. If you are only planting sensitive cultivars or are only planting the resistant cultivars, then harvesting the seed pods, they probably will only be bred with other plants of the same cultivar, if you're only planting one or the other. So, the seed pods might be more usable the following year. But our USDA partners, when they develop these seeds, they hand pollinate all of the seeds so that we know that it's maintaining the sensitivity of that line. So I guess that's just the long and short of snap beans for the winter. Is there any questions so far? Doesn't seem like it. We can also ask questions at the end, but feel free to ask questions. The other type of plant that we have in the garden are the potatoes. And so usually what I do is I let the potato plants die. They'll dry up and turn brown. If they're not doing that, you may need to just reduce watering for a few weeks so that they do start to dry up and shrivel. So you can dig up the tubers in the ground by you dig into the ground around the outside edges of the plant. So I actually just did this yesterday for our potatoes because all of our plants were brown and shriveled. And so I just took kind of a pitchfork and put it at the far edge, as far away from the potato, like a good distance away, I guess, and then just sort of tried to lift the soil underneath, and then you'll see some potatoes pop up. I was sifting through the soil. I had some bigger potatoes that were probably like that big and some tiny little ones that were that were really small that we pulled up. And then I suggest don't scrub the potatoes because you don't want to damage the outer membrane, but you can rub the dirt off. It's okay if dirt stays on the potato. And if there's still above ground vegetation attached to it, cut that off. You don't need to keep that. You can store these in paper bags or a cardboard box at a cool room temperature for 2 weeks to cure them. And then you can store them. So you want to store these pretty cool, like 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So, if you have a fridge that you can put them in, that would be great. And so do that until they're ready for spring planting. One of the problems that we've had with maintaining our potato cultivars is that we don't have a great place to store them. All of us just have home fridges and we can put some of the potatoes in there, but not all of them. So it just, it can be hard to store these. I fully understand that, but that is a great way to keep the potatoes. If you risk potatoes and you don't want to plant them next year for some reason, if you wouldn't mind sending them to us, that would be fantastic. Please just let us know. Our potato plants, we don't really have a whole lot of potatoes now that John Skelly hasn't been able to maintain that line for us anymore. And so if you do have some that you don't want or can't store, just let us know and we can figure something out. Yeah. Oh yeah. I guess I made a note that if you're not planting these in pots or they're near some of the other plants, sometimes you can have trouble. So some of our potato plants were growing in the same space as our coneflowers and our milkweed. And so it was hard to dig up the potatoes around the rhizomes. I have had potato plants over winter, they'll be in the soil and then they'll pop up next spring for the, a few that I've missed taking up. So that can happen, but also if there's too much freeze thaw, they can also rot, and that happens more in the spring, the freeze thaw, if it gets really warm and then keeps freezing. And so then they don't grow as well. Also, you risk critters eating them if you leave them in the ground. So those are the plants. The other thing that I would recommend doing is mulching the garden if you can, or if you're interested in doing it. So it keeps soil a little more insulated from severe weather. So from ice storms and snowstorms. Snows actually tends to be better than just bare ground because the snow also can insulate. When you have bare ground and you get to these really cold freezing temperatures, that's actually really hard on soil microbiota. And so so mulch can help a little bit with that and keep the ground insulated. It also helps with weeds and also to maintain soil moisture in the spring. So when you're watering through it, it sort of can keep soil moisture there. So in the springtime, the perennials will sprout through the mulch, and we can plant beans and potatoes in the soil. I just usually dig through the mulch and plant those in there, and they do pop up. These are some of the bean plants popping up through the mulch. One year in the past, this was in one of our container gardens with the drip irrigation system. So that's all I have right now about winterizing your garden. And so, we can ask or answer questions about this. We can, if you want help identifying ozone damage, we can also go through that. And I know that Emmy also had a question for all of us that she was curious about creating a budget for ozone gardens. So I'll stop sharing the screen now. I can start sharing again if folks want to see any of those slides again. Oh yeah, I guess the one slide that I didn't share just now, here I can share my screen again. I forgot that I had one more. It's just about growing gardens next spring. And I highlighted this information, and I have helpful websites here. So we'll share these slides so that you all have this information, but I already went over this. I just wanted to show you that there are resources there as well. Okay.
Anybody have anything in particular they want to talk about, questions they want answered?
Or any other tips? If anybody does a lot of gardening and has other tips to share for overwintering and storing seeds and whatnot.
Yes, this is Barbara. I've got a question. Maybe will you have any seeds available to send out for next year? Or do you not know yet?
Which types of seeds?
Well, maybe the beans.
Absolutely.
Beans.
Yep.
Okay.
We have a contact that helps supply those, and we
great.
should get those, no problem.
I think we still have some milkweed seeds and some coneflower seeds. We didn't get too much success trying to refrigerate them last spring, but I guess we could try to plant those this fall, right? And see how they do.
Yeah, you can try to plant those this fall. And we also, we can send rhizomes.
We have one.
So I've I know that you can do that in the fall, and I've actually never done that. So I don't know the best method for harvesting rhizomes and sending them. And to me, as being a plant person, I'm like, if you plant them in the fall, though, they're not gonna
it does seem counterintuitive
for the winter. Yeah, but I know that people have done that, and so if anybody has any advice on doing that and or would like us to do that, I can look into that option.
And I will say, our Virginia Living Museum friends, who I think will be joining us in a little bit, have done that plenty in the past. They have been great about providing rhizomes. I also add that if you planted this year, the second year, all of a sudden things start going a little bit more crazy. Like the first year, you're like, I got one little teeny tiny plant. Like the first year we had planted our milkweed, we had one little plant, and then next year. So if you've got a little bit of success, predict a little bit more success next year with what is currently growing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, we have one rhizome that I think you sent, Erica, and it seems to be doing fine, that we went ahead and planted in the summer. And then we have one plant that I was able to germinate from seed, and I haven't put it over in the garden yet. I was just watching it, but I'll put it in. I probably should put it in any time now, except it's still kind of warm. I was waiting for it to cool off a little bit. So maybe on the milkweed end we'll be okay. And so it's coneflowers are the ones, I'm interested in trying to get going. Maybe if we plant them this fall, we'll have some success in the spring.
Yeah, and you'll have some seeds.
So this is Jennifer. I'm also part of the local garden club, and I base what I'm going to be saying off of members that are master gardeners. I'm not one, but I've learned an awful lot from them. And I have a couple tips. So for coneflower, you know how there's those little round tops. If you cut them off and just collect them, put them inside of a coffee can with a lid and shake, 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 the seeds will come out, and you just pull out the empty little round things, and then you can just put your seeds inside of an envelope. We found that to be very, very successful. And if you mix it with sand, it's a little bit easier to plant because they're tiny, and you don't want to plant them too close together. But we've had success in our other gardens for many years, our civic gardens. We have over 11 civic gardens in our community that we manage, and coneflowers everywhere along the shoreline. So we're using that. I have something very interesting to share with you about potatoes. And I base this on my grandmother. Have you noticed that there are little round, they call them potato berries, that are on the plants? So if you clip those, and they're kind of greenish, and they're never going to get ripened like red tomatoes or anything. If you cut them in half and kind of use your thumb to squish out the insides of them, and put a little bit of water with them, you leave them for 2 weeks, and you'll see bubblies start coming up, because you have to be able to allow them to ferment so that the outside casing softens. And then she would use a very fine strainer to water, strain to get the seeds clean. And then she'd lay them out, let them dry. And then you can go ahead and you can actually plant them, and they're true tomato, they're true potato seeds. They kind of look like green tomatoes on the inside. So that's cool. Something I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, I haven't, I knew that those were probably seed heads of some sort, but I didn't know how to process them. So that's really good to know.
Yeah.
I didn't see
last but not least, I wanted to explain what we do with all of our gardens, because they're all organic, and the garden club has like zero budget. So we have to beg, borrow, and steal however we can, right? So we take all the leaves that are collected in our community are put into a landfill. That is just, it's a leaf landfill, but it's a kind of a misnomer, because what they do is they stir them up. They have a machine that goes through there every single day, Monday through Friday, stirs up these big mountains of leaves. And within a couple of years, because they produce tremendous heat, in a couple of years, you have this marvelous leaf humus. And so we have been putting about 4 to 6 inches on all of our other gardens in the fall, because along the shoreline in Ohio, we can have very cold weather like they have up in Maine. We could have a lot of snow like in Colorado, or we could have no snow, but it protects everything. And then the last thing I wanted to share about wood mulch, there's 2 kinds of wood mulch. There's wood mulch, then there's bark mulch. If you can get bark mulch, there's more nutrients in it. And even though it's going to break down some, and it's kind of expensive unless you can kind of collect it yourselves, which a lot of us are doing. When we see trees that are down, we go over, we debark them. The garden club is pretty ingenious what we do, but those nutrients, they're wonderful for helping the soil have nutrients in them to have to grow plants. That's all I have. Oh, one more thing, milkweed. So where I'm at, there's a lot of confusion because people are clipping off the milkweed pods when they're green, thinking, oh, I've got the seeds. You have to let them ripen. They have to turn brown. And just before they pop, and they might even be covered with those orange milkweed bugs. They're a type of beetle. It's okay. You can use soap and water and spray it on, and then use a hose, and they'll come right off. Dry those out, and then you can use those for your seeds, because we use milkweed in a number of our other gardens.
Yeah, those are all great tips. Thank you. Great to know how to get the potato seeds out. I haven't actually seen any seed heads on, or the potatoes that I've planted have not flowered. I don't think they're super happy, but it's good to know for future years if I do see those. and yeah, the milkweed pods do need to ripen, you're right. And thanks for the great tips about the mulch and also the compost. I think compost is a great way to add nutrients back to the system as well. So yeah, those are all great tips. Thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, that covers, I guess, a lot of tips and tricks. And I don't know, Erica, maybe we should consider if people wanted seeds this fall, we could ship some seeds because, you know, some of these things could be planted in the fall.
Yeah, certainly. We could certainly ship some coneflower and milkweed seeds again.
Yeah.
If folks didn't have enough left from what got sent or we're planting new gardens, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, Emmy, I know you have a question for the group, and I think actually our group here is just set theirs up, so they probably have the best advice for how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, hi everybody. I work for the National Park Service in the Air Research Division, and we want to make monetary grants to a couple parks this next year to set up ozone gardens. But we need to have some idea of what to budget and also sort of what to budget for. So if you've set up a garden recently, if you can send me sort of what your budget was, or if you want to set up a call to talk about it, I would really appreciate any kind of help and guidance here. Thanks.
And Emmy, I'll even suggest that the Google group that I set up, anybody can send that out, can send an email to everybody in the group. That's a really easy thing to do. You just have to send an email. What is it actually? And you might want to put it there because you'll get all sorts of great. So it's ozone-garden@cfa.harvard.edu. And anybody can send to this group, right? So if you want to send a message to everybody and see what you can get for feedback, that's a perfect use of it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that that's a great suggestion. And I guess, and you've probably thought about this a little bit, I mean, but it would probably be nice for people to highlight the different types of supplies purchased as well, because, you know, I imagine that each garden is going to be a little bit different in terms of how they've set it up and the types of things that they need. But I guess the hope is that none of these things are too expensive, but it would be, I think it could be also really useful if gardens can help, you know, I guess if you can help assemble this information, Emmy, and we could add that maybe to our starting an ozone garden document that we send out, just to give people a sort of sample potential budget that they can consider.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I mean, I assume that we're kind of going to have an Eastern Gardens budget and then a Western Gardens budget that also includes a watering system.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Something like that. And go ahead, Erica.
I was just going to say, right. So there's such a variety of the types of gardens that people have set up, right? First, you know, raised beds, container gardens, you know, built into their systems that they already have. So I think there's a good spectrum of what this is going to cost. In the past, with some of the tempo funding, we've given, you know, around the $2,000 mark. Obviously, that's not setting up an irrigation system. That's not included in that funding. And we know that people are providing some additional fundings from their own sites and things like that, but that's kind of what we've had for money to hopefully get things going.
that's great to know. Okay.
Yeah. And I think most of the gardens that are set up are probably close to available water if they need that. You know, it's one of the questions that we ask in our like interest form when people fill that out if they're interested in a garden. And so I think a lot of times they do have access to water, but you know, you could add in some sort of like irrigation tank or something like that if people need that kind of thing.
I'll say most of ours are at sites with lots of volunteers. So people are able to take on the duty of, I'm watering on this day, I'm watering on that day. And I think that helps too.
Yeah. And I know our container garden that's on the back patio of NCAR by the cafeteria, we have a rain barrel set up with a pump that is just a mechanical pump that doesn't require any like gravity or pressure. And that's what our drip irrigation line is set up to. And then they just add water from a hose. I mean, it's not a super convenient hose, which is why we have the rain barrel set up, but it's, we just fill up the rain barrel with the hose like once a week or something like that. And it does the water does decrease, I feel like, over the course of the week, just because you're losing some of that pressure in the rain barrel, and it's set up on a stack of blocks. I can send you a photo of what it looks like.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I mean, my expectation is that, since so many national parks have the visitor center and like the little planted plots outside, that maybe those could become ozone gardens.
Mm-hmm.
Because we definitely want to have them in a place where lots of people will see them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that you've also seen the one at Rocky Mountain National Park. Yeah, and that's I would guess that that's kind of what you're envisioning, is something like that. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, actually on the slide, the milkweed and coneflower slide, that was the garden in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Nice. Yeah, it's a little sad this year. I think it probably needs some replanting, but it's still there.
Oh, really?
Coneflowers hanging on. So
yeah, I'll just share this again. This is a picture of the garden. So it's in these raised beds. And it's kind of fun to see all the people. This is the data collection worksheet before we had the website. So just for others, I mean, I know you've seen it.
Yeah.
So that's raised bed. Yeah, have your gardens all had ozone damage that you've noticed? I know that we went through some of the photos last time. Yeah. Jennifer, I see you shaking or nodding your head. Yeah.
We've sent our photos over to Erica because the computer that I need to use has some issues, and I was unable to put it up on the website. So I had emailed everything over to Erica.
Great.
And it's not at your end, the issues are at our end. And not only did we see damage on leaves, but we also saw stunted growth. There was a difference between how the plants flourished. Even though they were 6 feet away from each other, they flourished differently. And you're absolutely right about the beans. The seed pods are longer on the resistant ones than the sensitive ones.
Yeah, that's cool. It's always actually like interesting to see, oh, this has an impact.
Yeah, I would say we've noticed the same thing with the beans. But I want to add that I've been just roughly correlating ozone readings at a nearby station with observations in our garden. And we really haven't had many days this season where ozone, the station reported elevated, long periods of elevated levels of ozone. And we haven't really seen what well, I'm not that experienced, but I haven't seen anything that I could definitely say was ozone damage on the potatoes or the tobacco leaves. The beans, yes. And I don't know if they're more sensitive. The sensitive beans are more sensitive than these other plants, or if, yeah, but we have had other, insect and other disease with some of the plants. So that's been a compounding thing too.
Yeah, the insect interactions are hard, and I don't know what to do about that, because that's we similarly here at NCAR have had a lot of insect damage, and I feel like we haven't seen quite as much ozone damage given the high concentration of ozone that we've had compared to past years where we haven't had as much insect damage.
We have a coal-powered generation electric plant in our community that thankfully I'm going to be very political here, is going to be decommissioned next spring. And even though it is what they call a peaker plant, it runs quite a bit. And I'm sure that there's going to be a different type of experience. Well, I'm not sure. We're believing there's going to be a different type of experience next year when there's no longer coal spewing into the atmosphere.
That'll be really interesting to see how the ozone concentrations change and how the plant damage changes. Interesting. And Barbara, I realize that one other thing, you know, with you're not seeing ozone damage on the other types of plants, very well might be. It's hard for me to say which plants are the most sensitive because we have high enough concentrations here in Colorado that I've seen damage on all of the plants. But it is one of the questions that I feel like I'm trying to figure out. And that's part of the reason why the data collection is so fun, because, you know, I feel like my gut instinct would sort of support what you're seeing, which is it's likely that the snap beans, especially the sensitive snap beans, are more sensitive than some of the other plants. But I don't know. And I think that having this continued data collection will help us to figure some of those things out. So thank you all, I guess, for planting your ozone garden.
And one other little observation too, because I've kept this little milkweed plant that I germinated on my balcony. My balcony is very close to a very busy highway, US 1. And I'm pretty sure I saw ozone damage on those leaves this summer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so I think, we can't rely totally on the readings from the station because it's maybe even a mile away from the garden, but it's the only station in our county. So I do think that, I'm going to go back and look at the data from that station over the summer and just see what it says, but I suspect it is a kind of good gauge of how much ozone we have been seeing in the summer.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Sorry, Erica, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that's one of the exciting parts of why Tempo is so excited about this project, right? Is that next fall we'll be launching, and so the summer after that, we'll be able to get even closer data to, you know, neighborhood by neighborhood size, you know, squares of what's your ozone look like, right? And so you won't have to rely on the monitor that's a couple miles away from your garden, that you'll have better data for what's happening right there.
Yeah. And I think, so Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that there still had to be some, I think I was surprised by this because I thought that Tempo was going to have those ground level ozone data, but I think that there's still some processing that needs to happen of the data and some evaluation to be able to know what the ozone concentrations are. Do I understand that correctly? Do you know?
Well, so what that is that, right, because this is a satellite measuring from above. And so there's calculations that they have to do to be able to say that this is the, you know, local ozone versus the ozone in the whole entire column, right? Because the satellite's going to have to measure everything in the entire atmosphere. And so there's a bunch of calculations that go into that. And then there's all sorts of math that's not my job. I wish Guan Yu was still here. Guan Yu, who was on at the very beginning and had to leave early, is actually part of the extended Tempo science team. And he's really interested in looking at those maps of what that's going to look like. It is one of the expected outputs, but it's not one of those things that happens automatically. There's some calculations that have to happen to determine kind of that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, is how accessible those data would be, because I know that there is some processing, or at least that's what I had understood, was that there was some processing required.
That is one of the things Mary and I are working on. And there's also like a Tempo early adopters group that's really interested in that as well. So it's going to happen. It's just kind of where it's coming from and all of that.
Right. And I guess the other thing that I was going to say is that Erica and I have been trying to write proposals to get funding for ozone monitors for the gardens, but we have yet to be successful in actually finding funding. And so if we do, or if you know of any grants that you could apply for that would allow you to get an ozone monitor for your garden, you know, if there's something local, we are more than happy to support you, and we'll continue to try and find funding to get some ozone monitors, because I do think, you know, Barbara, you're right, and in that ozone is variable, even neighborhood by neighborhood. And Erica's, point about tempo being available is a great point, but I also think that it would help to have those ground measurements to be able to evaluate the ozone concentrations from tempo, because there are calculations that need to be done. So all of those things are important. I want to say hi to Emily, and then Emmy, I also saw that you wrote a comment in the chat. Would you like to share, or should I can also read that if you would?
Sure. I would say if you've got ozone damage in your garden, one thing that you can look at to compare to a local monitor, or even the ozone action alerts is a good thing to use, is to look at the day of the year that the first ozone damage appears. So the Smoky Mountain National Park, they've had their ozone garden for what, 20 years?
Just about, I think. It might not be quite 20, but it's somewhere close to that.
And so what they've actually seen is that the first state where they see ozone damage on their plants has come later and later in the year every year, because there's been less and less ozone in the spring and early summer, which is good for the plants. And then I also just posted National Parks Conservation Association just did this report on how we need more monitoring. And so just something you can use to help if you're looking for setting up more monitoring for your ozone garden.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those resources.
So Emily, we're just having kind of an open conversation right now. We've gone over some general information on kind of overwintering gardens. I don't know if you have any special tips that you've gathered over the years. And then we're just kind of talking about all the different things people are interested in. So questions or things you want to share with the gardens, also great.
Gotcha. Yeah, our ozone season so I'm from the Virginia Living Museum, which is in Newport News, Virginia. And so our ozone season is kind of wrapping up here. It ends kind of late September, early October. All of our plants are pretty much done at this point. Our biggest issue is rabbits. So our plants, especially our snap beans, we did 2 plantings this year. So we did 1 in May, and then we did a second set of plantings in July. The July ones did not make it past its like first terminal buds. The rabbits were just like, ooh, fresh, delicious, and gone. So yeah, so we're in the process of cleaning things up. So for us to close the garden, we really just mulch it over. I do tend to remove as many weeds as possible. I try to maintain weeding as often as possible in the garden anyway. But yeah, we just mulch things over, including our milkweed. We will trim it back, but we don't dig anything up. We keep those rhizomes going year after year, so they stay within the garden. And we utilize a soaker hose in our garden as well, so we pull that up before mulching. And that's really how we overwinter our garden. We do have a second garden this year that we acquired through a NASA grant, and so we will be helping to close that garden as well. Similar setup. We're just going to kind of mulch over it. Their plants too are really at the end of the season. There's not too much quality data to be collecting from them anymore. But yeah, if you have any specific questions, again, I've been involved in our garden for this will be my 5th season. So I'll be happy to help you point you in the right direction if you need help.
Thanks, Emily. Emily, great resources. Someone who's had a garden for many, many years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw that Barbara asked if anyone knows the cost of an ozone monitor, and there's a wide range, I guess, of costs. And so it depends on the type of ozone monitor, and there are trade-offs with maintenance and reliability and cost. And so Margaret Pippin, who is a collaborator of ours at NASA Goddard, she said Goddard, right? Yeah, okay, NASA Goddard. She's done some work comparing. No, she's not at Goddard.
No, NASA Langley.
Langley, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. I always mix these things up. NASA Langley, thank you. I was like, when I said Goddard, it didn't seem right. But she has tested different types of ozone monitors against each other, and she has done a lot of work with that. So the type of ozone monitor that I have, it's called a 2B ozone monitor, and it's also what we used in my lab in grad school, and so that's why I had that. And sometimes they have refurbished sensors that you can get for cheaper, but they're several $1,000s. There's a cheaper type called a Care Clip ozone monitor that Margaret, that's one of Margaret's recommendations actually. And I think that they require a little bit more maintenance, but she thinks that those are pretty decent lower cost sensors. And I can't remember, I had a quote for what those were last year, and I think it was in like the $3,000 range, if I remember correctly. So those are options, and I guess things to think about. If like I said, if you know of places where you can apply for local grants, and then yeah, there are other places that we can keep trying to apply for larger grants, but sometimes it's easier to apply for something smaller scale for just your individual garden than it is for us to apply for many sensors across gardens.
And just to chime in a little bit, so through the grant that we worked through this year, I put in the link, yearsl is the handheld monitor that we used. So you can get it as a handheld, or you can get it mounted so that you can mount it to like the side of a building, and it'll take continuous ozone data rather than you turning it on and off every time you want to go out into the garden. This one was specifically recommended to me by Margaret Pippin from NASA Langley. And this one, it's definitely not like top of the line, but if you want pretty simple readings, we were lucky enough that NASA Langley also takes ozone measurements, so we could compare ours to theirs and have pretty similar measurements as a baseline. But this one for us, it cost us $1,300. And yearsl ranges anywhere from, again, about $1,000 to $3,000. So this specific one was about $1,300.
Thanks, Emily. Emily, I have a question for you. Since you all tend to have a decent amount, how is your coneflower doing this year?
Not great. So we only have like one little patch of coneflower left, because slowly over the years, the coneflower has not been thriving. Our milkweed's been pretty consistent, but our coneflower patch is small. So it's not in our actual garden itself, it's right next to it. Just because we have the hopes of bringing tobacco, cigar wrapper tobacco, hopefully next season. Yeah, it's not doing fantastic. And actually our first batch of seeds didn't do great over at the school either. We had a very weird anomaly. We utilized the same seeds that you sent us this year, and the ones that we planted over at our middle school garden got grossly attacked by some sort of bacteria really quick. And then the ones at the VLM garden thrived and were beautiful and grew to have, nice snap beans and all of this stuff. But the middle school garden one, like, they did not thrive at all. And we also did a second planting and same sort of thing. So it was very unusual because it was a newly established garden, newly established topsoil. I made sure I got the soil that was not treated, but burnt first to make sure like bacteria and all that stuff was, good to go. And yeah, the beans did not thrive that well either, specifically at the middle school garden. Wonderfully at our garden at the museum, but not at the middle school one.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about other types of diseases that affect these plants, and I've been sort of learning as I go, but I think it would actually be really useful if we can start documenting that and put together maybe a resource for other gardens, moving forward, and just to share with each other. If we figure out types of things that are that are affecting our plants, or if we can maybe share some photos or try to figure out in some way, because what I've been doing a lot of is looking online and doing, like searching for, doing an image search, especially for the what I'm seeing on the plants. And then I look through images and try to select the ones that look like what I'm looking at. And then I will dig in further to the websites. And once I have a better idea, I can search for that particular disease. And so that's how I've been learning. But I do think it would be great to start putting together a resource. I wanted to do this before we really launched the Ozone Garden website, but it just didn't happen. I think I need help from other people, maybe some folks who are who have done a lot more gardening and know a lot more about diseases. And I've looked into, I've tried to reach out to the CSU Extension office, and I was put in touch with somebody specific, but I never heard back. So I can keep trying that too. But I think it would be interesting for us to sort of crowdsource that in a way. And maybe it would be easier actually to go to an extension person with the types of things that we're seeing, saying, we're not sure if we're identifying this correctly. Can you help? And then we can put together a resource that way. I think it would be really useful. We have something that looks like a virus on our coneflowers in one of our in one of our NCAR gardens, and I don't know what it is. So that's, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was lucky enough to have an intern this summer, and she did take some pretty good pictures. So I will happily start to reach out to people and try to get a better identification, because we too did a Google search and we were like, it could be this and it could be this and it because my plant pathology background is really what John Skelly taught me when first starting this program. So it's very basic.
Yeah.
One of the things we're seeing along the shores of Lake Erie is that because of climate change and the storms that are occurring in the south coming up from the Gulf, we're receiving insects types that we've never received before in our zone. We are a growing zone that's a 6B as in Bob, and we're seeing insects we've never seen before, and we're documenting it. We're working with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Wildlife. I don't know if that's affecting others, but it's definitely affecting all of our trees and our citizens' landscaping.
Yeah, I think that's going to continue to be an issue, unfortunately, as we're changing landscapes and changing our environment. These things will continue to change. But yeah, I think that there are things that are sort of common, like there's potato beetles and there's alternaria on the potatoes and things like that. And so we can start to put together resources of those types of things, accompanied with photos. I think that would be really interesting, because it can help people to distinguish what is ozone damage versus what is not. Be helpful, I think. Yeah. Well, we're reaching the top of the hour, so I don't know if folks have any other questions, or I would also be interested in hearing your thoughts. This was the last of our scheduled webinars, and I would be interested in hearing your thoughts for what kinds of information you would like over the winter. If we just want to wait till next spring. I know that everybody is really busy, so I hate to, add unnecessary meetings, but I also want the gardens to feel supported. So striking that balance, and hearing from you all what that balance, what that's best as, could be helpful.
I also have a bit of a question for the group. No one has an immediate response. I'll let you think about both of these at the same time. As I mentioned, Tempo will be launching next October, November timeframe, which is very exciting. And so we want to be able to support garden sites and having some sort of event, connecting with their local visitors around Tempo. Obviously, most gardens will have been closed for the winter at that point, but we'd love to hear from all of you what kinds of supports, things, materials you might want to see, or what kinds of events like to have that support for, so we can start thinking about what we can do. We have a whole year to plan, and we'd love to figure out what you might want to see, what you might want to do. If you want to have things right around the lunchtime or a little bit before, so that your gardens are still there. Whatever we can do, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I wonder, Erica, if it's worth sending out a survey just to the broader garden group also to ask these questions. And so, I know that if somebody asked me one of these questions on this call and I didn't have an answer in mind, I would probably forget.
Absolutely. And perhaps maybe in addition to sending out a survey, we might want to think about planning something this winter, maybe when people are having their quiet time, for more group feedback on having some time for a chat of what you'd like to see, what we can do to support you better, having a chance for that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, like a listening session. That's a great idea. That might be, I don't know if we could probably do both of those things, survey and a session. I think both would be useful.
Because we're right across from an elementary school and behind us is a high school, they're always, and I have to back up, our location, we have over 50 employees from NASA that live in our community. They're always very interested in launches of whatever, and they actually watch them on television. I think if we could get the time, or there could be a recording so that schools can see it. I think that this is something that when I was a kid, I was going to tell my age, we saw the landing on the moon, right? So I think this is so important for human health, for animal health, for vegetation, agricultural health. I think that we could really get the schools involved in watching the launch.
Yeah, the satellite launch, that would be cool.
Absolutely. I will bring that to our team and see what we can do for that.
Another thought along that line is, I know one of the things that's mentioned in some of the literature is that practical things that the everyday person could do to help or to just be more aware. And one of them is, well, don't, feed any more gas in your car beyond, when the automatic shutoff goes off. But are there more things like that that might be interesting for kids to know? And also, are there things that, some way to train them to observe ozone damage, not only in the ozone gardens, but maybe elsewhere, too. So they're just more aware of, hey, I know what's going on. I live near a big highway or whatever, or a power plant, a coal power plant. So I don't know if there might be some other ways to get more information that makes it relevant and somewhat tangible for kids.
Absolutely. There's so I just put in the link to the Ozone Garden website, the overview page, and if you click on the help by changing your actions tab, there's actually a bunch of information there if you want. So yeah, don't fuel past the click and switch to electric lawnmowers. I just convinced my husband to buy an electric chainsaw, for example. So those kinds of things. And then, especially if you're using gas powered equipment, do that in the evening. None of these individual actions are going to have an immediate, large scale impact. There are other things that need to happen for widespread change, but to get enough people to change their individual actions, I think it can be really helpful, and people feel like they're doing something, and these are small changes. And so the same thing with don't fuel past the click, fuel in the evening rather than in the morning if you can. Go to the gas station on your way home from work rather than on your way to work or school. So I think those types of things are really useful, and we try to capture that in this infographic on the that's on under that tab. So if you wanted to use that at all, you're more than welcome to. We had a graphic designer work with us on that.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea for us to have that as one of our signs at the garden.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we have the raw file as well. So if you wanted to make it bigger or whatever, just just in touch. Erica, we didn't have that information on the new science you developed, did we? Not all of this, or did we? I thought I remember.
It's on a pared down version of that.
Okay.
The one that's on the site is a little overwhelming when it goes on to assign with other stuff, but we did a pared down version of that.
Okay, that's what I remembered then.
Yep.
So
So
encouraging
things like that. That's a great one for kids, right? Encouraging your family to go on bike rides instead. That's what they can do themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of the
So
things,
that's-
unfortunately, are not great things kids can make decisions on, but they can encourage their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. So that is available on the sign files then that Erica has, and
Great.
you know, that's a less detailed version. This website is a more detailed version. So,
and Emily, I'm not sure kind of where things are at with your wrapping up all of the things you've put together for the classrooms, but I know that at some point there'll be an opportunity to share a lot of those resources with this network as well, right?
Yes, we were just kind of wrapping up like the evaluation side of things. We were trying to collect as much data, you know, from the students and stuff as possible, and especially with my intern just went back to college as well. So yeah, this month is our putting the pretty little bow on everything. So yes, hopefully by the end of this month things will be sent out for you guys.
Awesome. Yeah. So if people don't remember, Emily and the Virginia Living Museum created a curriculum for classrooms to engage with this, and they'll be sharing that with the network as part of their grant. One of their agreements is to share it with all of us, which is very exciting. So there'll be a whole suite of resources available that are more attuned, you know, for engaging young people in particular.
Yeah, it was specifically for the middle school age, but there's enough that you can either, you know, increase for high school or decrease for elementary school.
and I would say if anybody else has resources that they want to share, please don't hesitate to send those our way. You've developed certain things or whatever. It is 2 o'clock or just, I guess, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But yeah, thank you so much for all of your thoughts and comments and feedback, and for engaging with us throughout this Ozone Garden season. Please send Erica and I an email if you have thoughts for how we can support you over the winter, if there are things that you want to work towards, and if there are other you know, things that you're excited about with the launch that we can work towards. Any of those ideas or thoughts or suggestions, please just don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Absolutely. And don't hesitate to use the Google group that we now have. Even if you're not a Google user, if you're a Google user, you can go to the group and kind of finagle a little bit more. But if you're not a Google user, you can just email to the Google group and it will go to everybody. And so that's just ozone-garden@cfa.harvard.edu.
Yeah. And that list is quite large, actually. There are quite a few people who don't regularly join these meetings that are on that list. So keep that in mind. Just as you're emailing people.
And I'll put that in the chat too for everybody. CFA is Center for Astrophysics, which is where I work. So that helps. It makes it easier to understand what those 3 letters are.
Yeah, well, thank you all. And yeah, enjoy your fall.
All right, we'll see you all next time.
Take care, everyone.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great.